You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today's episode is part one of an interview that I did with Adrian and Shae Misiak, the husband and wife team behind Third Way Mentorship. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, welcome to today's episode. I am super excited to have some guests here with me today. They are Shae and Adrian Misiak, the husband and wife team behind the Third Way Mentorship. They are Catholic mentors certified through the Catholic Psych Institute's model of applied personalism, which equips them to provide daily professional accompaniment that integrates psychological science with a deeply Catholic understanding of the human person. Shaelin spent several years working as a licensed therapist, but made the transition to providing mentorship full-time after seeing how much more effective it proved in helping clients find lasting freedom. And in witnessing the transformation she experienced through her own personal mentorship and how it changed their marriage, Adrian was so deeply moved that he decided to make a career shift himself. With a background in Catholic theology, education, and years of experience in the corporate world, he felt called to bring his own gifts into this work and walk alongside others in the same way. That is so awesome. Together, they now accompany clients every single day, offering real-time guidance and support in the moments people need it most. Their shared mission is to help people find peace and freedom within their families, whether it's parents trying to raise their children differently or adult children learning to step out of old family patterns and into the life God created them for. So thank you so much for being here. I love your bio. I love just your mission, and I'm so excited to share you with my audience today.
Well, we're excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, you hear your own mission sometimes and you're like, oh, wow, someone's doing that, huh? Oh, it's me. Okay. Big deal.
That is awesome. And I shared, that we were talking before I hit record, and I was telling Adrian and Shae that just reading through their website, I was like nodding my head off, like, yes. It was almost like they've been spying on me, but I know they haven't. And just the way that they understand what those of us who have toxic in-laws or toxic parents are going through it's just so beneficial, because there's so many people out there in this space who are talking about like romantic relationships, or they're not talking about things from a Catholic perspective. And some of that information is just really bad. It's just really bad. And so to have, a Catholic couple who have, they each have their own stories to bring to this conversation with, and have this understanding that outsiders, you just don't get it if you're an outsider. You just, as much as you can intellectually grasp things until you've been in the trenches, it's just not the same. So I'm just so grateful for them agreeing to be on here today, and I'm going to fire away a million questions now and try to help us understand things that maybe need a little clarification. So if that's all right, I will jump right in. I got my glasses on to our first question. Unless y'all have anything else y'all want to share?
Yep. No, let's do it.
Yep.
All right. So a lot of these questions are kind of personal because they were me. So it's a little bit selfish, but a lot of wives can sense that something is just off in how their husbands relate to their parents. I know I did for years, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Can you explain what enmeshment looks like? I didn't even know what that word was until, probably maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And what that looks like in marriage, like the subtle signs that might help one of my listeners or somebody watching this, realize that, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. Because I think so many women are living with this, and then they have no words for it. They have no language for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important I think language and understanding and being able to put a word on something is so important to being able to, I think it's a necessary step to being able to then master it, and understand how to navigate it. And so I think like in general, enmeshment is a dynamic in which it's almost like codependency, dependent behaviors on your caregivers or your spouse's caregivers, that looks like I have to do everything they ask. I have to be exactly what they want me to be in order to remain in connected relationship with them. And so like there's a huge fear and a huge inability to uh or a lack of capacity rather than an inability, because it's a learned behavior to separate. And so the separation that happens often when somebody gets married out of an enmeshed family is like the tension and the confusion and the anxiety of that is so high. And I think as, wives who might have husbands coming from enmeshed families, what that can look like or feel like is, your husband is this person that you love, this person you fell in love with. And then there is this experience where either you're getting ready to go to a family event or you're at the event or you're leaving the event, and there's this mood shift, right? There's this personality shift almost actually, more than mood shift. Is just like, what like what happened to you? Where'd you go? And this can last for days. I think like days leading up in preparation, like getting their nervous system prepared for that interaction or that encounter, or days or weeks afterward coming back into it's like a complete shift of like, this is who I am in this life and in this relationship, and this is who I am outside of this life and this relationship. And so that can be really disorienting for the spouse of the person of the enmeshed family of like, what is going on? Like, you're not yourself. Who are you? So that sort of like feeling in the face of that is really normal.
Yeah.
I think. And a lot of times too, people who come from enmeshed families have learned to survive and cope with not having their own, not being able to have and hold their own opinions and their own uh to trust themselves, to trust their own instincts. And so you'll see a lot of like black and white thinking. It's like either this is true or that is true. There's difficulty holding kind of nuance. And when somebody tries to, when the spouse or the wife tries to try and say like, well, don't you see this is going on, there's probably going to be faced with a lot of defensiveness. Because again, that the fear of separation from what you've been, your personality, your being, your entire life is enmeshed. The word enmeshed is like, you don't know who you are without it. And so if somebody comes in and tries to separate, it feels like a threat to your own life. It feels like a threat to your own being. And so there's a lot of defensiveness, a lot of shutting it down, not wanting to talk about it. That's just the way my mom is. It's not that big of a deal. Explaining away behavior a lot. Like all of a sudden where you're like, wait, if you saw anybody else doing this, you would think it's not okay. Why is it okay for this to be happening to you? But there's like just like a mask, right? Kind of a mask feeling of like they just can't see it.
I would say like as definitely someone who's experienced it from go figure, the masculine side, right? It is just such a it's such a way of surviving, that yeah, that's the big thing. It's such a threat to imagine that it could be different. And I would really say, even as someone who's fairly introspective and aware, like to any wives or to any men out there, like seeing it in other people is so easy, and then seeing it within yourself is I mean, it is just you are so wrapped up in it, and it is protecting you. But also the idea of how it could change is terrifying. Like it's uncomfortable. You can't even, it's hard to even admit, oh, like I'm scared of it. I just don't, it just seems impossible, right? So I would say like if, you know, if women have that intuition that something is off, it's off. And it's so easy to question yourself and that, but really, like, you only need so many data points on top of the fact that you have been given a feminine gift, um, and coming out of it sort of on the other side, I can say like what a relief it is to know that you are not alone in it. And we'll talk a lot more about tangible or experiences. But yeah, those moments of like experiencing your as Shae experienced me being like, whoa, who's that? Who is that person? I've never been on a date with that person. We don't do that. Um, that's real. And I think a lot of men, I think a lot of us don't realize how much help we actually could need and how much we could benefit from having that held and touched. And yet, just like anything, it's just so tender that it requires a lot of delicacy, but we also need to acknowledge it ourselves. So I think honestly, just really simple stuff like these all can be appropriate, but you know, if duty, that sense of duty and also the heaviness of duty, like, you know, sometimes you do things out of duty and then sometimes you're like, well, this feels like I'm going to die in the line of duty just to, you know, be there for my family. Something's off. If that idea of family first is kind of like a cudgel or a weapon, or perhaps like what's dragging your husband along into doing anything, like he doesn't know that he wants help, and just that shrug of like, well, she's my, you know, that's my motto. What do you want me to do, right? I mean, so basically we're just saying like, we actually have his and hers Sopranos shirts that we didn't think to wear. And so we were gifted them, and I don't know whose was whose, but she has the Tony, and I have Livia, which I thought later on we're like, wow, this is so appropriate.
Yeah.
But I
That's a
mean,
very, very niche thing to say, but I feel like the Sopranos gives a really good example of what a toxic enmeshment might look like.
it can be basically as simple as that, and then to say like, oh, I see myself in Tony, and just some of these things that I can't even say that, I can't even acknowledge that that's going on, but but yeah, that's kind of that's something that can be immediately recognized and just carefully
Mhm.
explored.
And I think for me, like one of the things that was so attractive for me about my husband was how close he was with his family.
Mm.
And then, and I didn't realize that it was, very unhealthy. And it was very much through so many years of our marriage. Praise God that y'all are so young that you discovered this early.
Yeah.
Because, we were going through it, and it was like, I felt like I was in a competition with his family. And it was just like, well, mom comes first. And I understand that, they were, and I mean, they are his parents, but they had him for so long that there was a sense of duty that he, attributed to them. And it's not an easy shift, just because the mass has ended, you're married, that, yeah, all of a sudden, it's going to be an easy shift mentally for either of you to go, away from mom and dad, to leave and cleave and then be married. But, yeah, I was just like, oh, he's so close with all his family. Like, it's wonderful. And I was like, oh, he's too close with his family, and he has to check in, or feels like he has to check in. And then his parents expect him to check in. And so it's, yeah, I'm so glad you're here, Adrian, because I know that, I actually know that I have at least one male listener, because it's the wife whose parents were toxic. But it's so good to have, because each of us as men and women have different perspectives and different approaches. And it's so good to have both of you on here, to have just a voice for both sides, because it is hard for those of us who didn't grow up in that kind of family to understand just what you're dealing with. So thank you for sharing that. And just like you said, one of the things that I noticed was my husband transforming into like a little boy sometimes, not like childish, but into that little boy role when his parents were around. He was this confident, military officer, business owner, all these things. But then, like, when his mom and dad came around, it was like he would shrink. So, from your perspective as a couple, how do you recognize when family loyalty has crossed the line from being healthy to harmful? And then, if I can tack in another question, and I can repeat it again if you need me to. And then I want to ask Adrian, what can help husbands to see that protecting their wives isn't the same thing as betraying their parents? Because oftentimes it seems like it's one or the other. It's either or. So, yeah, let me go back and do the questions again, because I know I talked too much. So, so how do you recognize when family loyalty has crossed from healthy to harmful, and then what can help husbands see, that they can protect their wives and their families, and that's not betraying, their family of origin?
Yeah. I think a couple of like personal stories come to mind here. One being when Adrian and I first started dating, I can't remember what holiday was, if it was his birthday. I think it was his birthday, which made it even more monumental. We went to dinner with his mom, and there was a plan. There was an idea of what we were going to do, and this is very typical in his dynamic with his mom, that it kind of it went sideways, and it didn't go the way that it was expected or he was told, and this is very normal. And he was used to this. He was used to then just shutting down and letting mom do whatever mom wanted to do, and like kind of run the show. And I was there, and this is not at all what I knew of Adrian. This was one of the first times I had met his mom. I was kind of aware of different things, but he was very like good about, saying like, I want you to form your own opinion. I don't want to color your opinion of my mom. And so I witnessed this, and he became like, he was sitting on the couch, and it was like he was behind a 15-foot wall. Like he couldn't be reached. He was like just totally zoned out. And I was like, what? What is happening? It's like, what is going on? What happened to you? You're just letting this happen? Like, you can say something, like, right? You could say something. And that's kind of how the rest of the day went, because I didn't want to get into it while we were there. And I was just like, okay, well, we'll just let this go. But then afterwards, I was just thinking, I was like, this is the man I want to marry. This is the man I want to have children with. It's not okay for him to turn into that, what that was when our children are around. Like, we need to figure out how we're going to navigate this so that he can still be himself, like who God created him to be, like strength and courage and all of him, even in the face of his mother, God willing, if that's possible. That's its own journey. But that was really eye-opening to me. It's like, oh, something is happening here that isn't okay. Like, he's lost his freedom in front of his mom. So that's one kind of story. And then another experience is like, this isn't firsthand, but secondhand, witnessing my parents and their marriage, and my father's mother, and the harmful effects of like a mom who is the best. She knows she's the best that her sons can have, and nobody else can be better. And she expresses this directly in front of their wives in a very critical and just actually totally inappropriate way. And as a child, I didn't really know what was going on, but later as I grew up and I was seeing this, I was like, oh my gosh, like, and there was no protection of my mom in those moments. It was just, this is my mom. This is how she is. We all just need to get over it and let it roll off our shoulders. And so like seeing that and seeing the devastation and the hurt that it caused my mom and so many of my aunts, was just like, I think that's one way that it becomes harmful, because then there becomes this, again, kind of like what you were naming, Miriam, of like this competition and this sense of like, am I ever going to be enough? And my mom, constantly having to strive to be as big in her husband's eyes as his mom was. And so, those are some examples. And then I think in our personal marriage with my family, like a little bit less obvious and a little bit more insidious was like the closeness. My family also experiences this closeness, and so many of my cousins that I've married into the family are like, your family is so awesome, they're just so close. and it's true, and it's really beautiful. And I thought it was really beautiful and wonderful until we got married, and it became apparent, through our relationship, that there were so many times that I actually lacked freedom in the face of like family events. I didn't feel free to do my own thing. I didn't feel free to let him do his own thing. He likes to fish. He likes to do these things, and we'd go on camping trips, and he'd want to go and leave, and I was like, you can't, you can't leave. You have to be here. And whether that's my family dynamic or just my own stuff personally, but there was a level of enmeshment there that maybe didn't appear harmful right at first, but if that had gone on without correction or without looking at it, would have eventually caused a lot of harm in our relationship and our dynamic. And I think that it's kind of like that subtle, slow, like erosion of loyalties between like me and Adrian versus me and my family, and like how backwards that is in regard to like as a couple and as a married couple, we are to become one, and we are to become one flesh, and we are to become a family. And how we were talking earlier too of like how that separation is supposed to happen, and there's pain in that. And I think that so often the pain and the tension and the anxiety felt from that separation feels wrong, or it feels bad and problematic. And so we cling to that. And sometimes that can cause more harm long-term in a marriage relationship than you realize.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Miriam, I think you were, if I remember right, it was something to the effect of how can men tell, right? That there's a difference between protecting family versus it's not necessarily betraying family versus loving your spouse and your own family. I mean, I think first of all, just there's such a pivotal part of boundaries being appropriately understood. So high level, if you're this person who likes to sort of see the general idea first before you get into the details, right? If you are breaking a pattern of discomfort, well, you exist in that, right? And there's also the fact that probably the most empowering thing you can do is realize that you are an individual, like, meant to grow, and you're locked into this thing forever. If you don't exit out of that, you're not even just betraying, like, you're not just betraying your parents, but you're betraying yourself. You're betraying them in a way, right? Because they don't get a chance to be in the face of who they are. I think long term, I think the real like salvific risk here is that it doesn't allow you to truly see who you are, see your pain, or even like welcome the mercy and welcome the fact that you are broken and may need help. And so I think the long term is like, actually there can be such heavy risks of not realizing that you are your own individual, and that is a gift to everyone. On a practical level, I mean, I think about this, and like I experienced I have a very like deep wound toward tardiness and just kind of letting my mom run the show, a lot of times tardy. And my standard for tardy is like someone's 15 minutes late. That's that's the blink of an eye. I mean, I can handle an hour and a half, 2 hours. Um,
Wow.
right then,
Wow.
right. That's when like, now it's a problem. Until then, like I'll go have an adventure in my head and you know just completely disassociate, right? Just to survive or whatever. But so I was thinking about that, just like even on the day that we were getting married, there I had this moment where I was just like, well, my mom is here, my mom is late, but she wants some wedding pictures on her own phone. Let's just let this happen. And then I was like, wait, everything else is affected by this. And like I'm changing entire family plans and just just to keep the peace, right? Just to keep things as I know them. Um, and having this feeling that you always had, but somehow I think just even the beginning of the marriage and experiencing some grace was like beginning to have the seed of like I don't actually like this. Um, and so I think that's something that can be recognized, and I do believe that if you're open to that grace within marriage, like that can be revealed to you. Just to put it bluntly, like you still have to be a man and acknowledge it, and acknowledge that like you're to be vulnerable. Practically speaking, like there are I think we have more anecdotes later, but so many financial implications too. In a lot of these families, right? Um, Sometimes it can be, um, there can be something good and truly authentically beneficial to everyone spiritually and obviously financially to share or support one another. But I think most of the time it exceeds and it's either manipulative or it's just a grasping at again for me it was like just the sense of like if I don't show up financially and make the moves that I have always done, um well, truly it was like I don't know what will happen. Like I don't know any other way and I can't imagine any other way. And I really think like I think about that like if you are experiencing those feelings as a man within your family, um, how could you possibly how could you possibly be free, let alone like, leading people into freedom? So it's like we deserve better.
Mm.
Well, and Shae, um, I think you had something else, right?
Yeah, well, I think just to piggyback off of that, I would say, like, I think talking about money, I think the question was originally like, how do you know what's like when loyalty becomes harmful?
Mhm.
And I think when there are too many strings attached and you don't feel free to either receive or give financially to your family if they're needing the support or even wanting to give you support, that can become harmful in your marriage too. If there's the idea that, okay, we're giving you all this money, but that means you have to do X, Y, and Z for us, or that means you have to honor us before your marriage or your children or your wife, like that's problematic. And that's like really harmful. I think sometimes money gets overlooked as a theme of harm in these dynamics, but it sometimes can be the most critical one. Either being expected that you help your family financially or that you receive their money. And then, yeah, I think we were talking too about like, is there any sort of unwillingness to be able to hold nuance, I guess, in regard to what it comes to issues with your in-laws. So like the harm that can come if like your spouse or yourself personally is unable to receive any sort of criticism or any sort of questioning regarding your family of origin.
Yeah, I'm thinking particularly as it's such a familiar one. But that I I still remember just that sort of idea, just almost like when things get really out of control, just someone almost like snapping and pointing is like, don't you criticize my mother. You always stand up for your mother, right? Um, and then like you see that from one parent, and as a child, right? A lot of children are like, okay, so I always stand up for my mother. Well, then what do you do when like dad's always standing up for his mother and he's disrespecting your mother, and you're supposed to stand up for your mother, but that's your father. It's like a really depressing who's on third it's kind of skit, right? Um, like how could this possibly be healthy? How could you possibly be um protected? And I think really the other thing in that is like as a man, upholding the dignity of others is something that we are capable or like called to do. Um, but at the same time, like if you don't know who you are, if you don't have that modeled for you, which chances are if you're coming from that kind of place, you haven't fully had that modeled for you, right? Like how can you give something that you haven't been given? How could you learn something that hasn't been modeled for you? And I think that like, to break out of that, to realize that there's more to like being a good son, to realize that there's a whole lot more than just those things that you knew. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of strength, and it takes a lot of willingness to let someone hold that for you and show you something different. So kind of like that paradoxical sort of be weak to be strong. Well, you have to let that be held for you before you can hold it for someone else. And it's not a betrayal to explore like where you have been failed, because then you can also find out this is where I lack. This is where I can build from. Okay, these are the heavy costs and penalties that I have paid. I think as you understand that, you realize, oh my gosh, these are the heavy costs and penalties that generations of my family have incurred and paid. And like how tired everyone must be. How tired are you? And then all of a sudden that idea of duty is like, okay, like that's possible, but maybe there's a more appropriate way of doing that. Maybe there's a more redemptive way of doing that. I mean, the answer is yes, there is, right? Um, but if you're just doing this, chances are until you get there. I mean, I did this so much. It was like I show up, I show up, I show up until it just is too much. Then I shut down, and then at some point I'm gonna lash out. Someone's gonna get it for a little bit. Then I'll just wrap it up, go under, and just control it again, and I'm good for the next 6 months, right? How are you going to bring that to your family? How are you going to bring that to your children? How are you going to bring that to the rest of your life? Like, is that a way worth living? And are you not better than that? Of course, the people around you are better than that, but have you truly like learned to believe that and see that? So, a compassionate, merciful look toward yourself. Oddly enough, I think the most appropriate place to start to realize to see kind of reality for your own self. And I think as men, like that first step is so hard, but it is by far the most necessary for that fruit of just protecting and stewarding yourself, and then like your family into a place of peace and better relationship. So I said a lot. I feel like I'm kind of lost in it, but I tried to circling around what you asked. So
No, no, no. What I got from what you said is, my husband, I would bring up some of the things that I saw in his family, which of course, naturally, he would get defensive about.
mhm.
And I know that he would say things like, well, I don't want to blame my parents. And it's like, no, I think there is a distinction between blaming and seeing things for how they actually are and how they're affecting you. And so I think, at least what I have observed from a layperson and my husband, is that, he was so resistant to blame his parents that he kind of, I don't know, like rosy colored glasses, kind of Thomas Kincaid painting, image of his family,
Mm.
because I think that was just a survival technique. Like he had to see his parents and had to put them on a pedestal and had to, almost worship the ground that they walked on, because if he didn't, there was a bad price to pay.
Mhm.
And so for him to look at them as anything but this model of the community, these, pillars in, their church, this, the strong foundation of the family, was like his whole paradigm would have to crumble.
Yeah.
And it did.
Yeah.
Because that when he finally, like the scales fell off his eyes, he could see things clearly. And it was like, oh my goodness, my parents are not who I thought they were. And I think we all go through that just as adults, as we, see our parents in a different way as we get married and we have kids, and we're like, okay, they are real people. They're not, immortals. But it's different to not blame, but to actually see things how they really are. And then, like you said, be vulnerable and yeah, just see things how they are, so that now, we know what we're dealing with. Like, playing cards, if you can't see what your cards are, you don't know how to play.
Yeah.
And so now that you know what your cards are, now you know how to step forward. Now you can be, the best son that you can be, the best husband. And that's what I love about what y'all do, is that, you take your clients and you work on that. You help them to be the best that they can be, in spite of the chaos that is around them. So there is this harsh reality that I see a lot, and that is that there are women who have husbands who are not on the same page. They don't see, what's going on with their parents is problematic. They just see, like those horrible platitudes. Oh, that's just how mom is. That's just how dad is. We're family, blah, blah, blah. So how can these couples get on the same page when, they fundamentally disagree on, on the issues with their in-laws, or parents even being a problem? Like if the husband doesn't see it as a problem, like my husband for years didn't see, he knew that there were issues, but he didn't see it as a problem. Like, how do you help? How do you help my, me and my husband, 20 years ago, see and help him get on, the couple on the same page? Is there anything? Is there magic formula? Give us the magic formula.
I tell my clients so often, I work with couples a lot, and I was like, I wish there was a magic button. I wish I could just press it for you and make it all better. But this takes time. It's hard work. It's like, it can be brutal at times, but it is like so worth it in the end. And I think like what you're saying is like the brutality of it is like the scales falling off of your eyes. Like finally you're in a dark room and then somebody shines a bright light in your eye. That is jarring and that hurts. And it's like, it takes a while to adjust to that. And so I think like, unfortunately, no magic formula, but there is a way. I guess there is a formula. It's not magic. It's not going to happen overnight, but there is a way to that. And I think you actually like set it up well, with what you were saying too, is like the difficulty of doing this work is that so many of us have concocted this vision of reality, or this, this idea of our families that we needed as children growing up to survive, to stay connected. And then we meet someone new and they show us that, oh, life isn't exactly the way I thought it was. Family, relationships, all of that is different. And then you kind of have that option. You kind of like hit that crossroads where you're like, okay, I can try and figure out how to integrate these two things into one, which is what we're really called to do, because there's good in both, right? There's good in your wife and the new family that you're building, and there's good in your family. But there's like, it's like, how do I do that? And so most people instead say, well, this is just who I am here, and this is who I am here. And then you live this split life. And I think that's what you're talking about, is like, okay, what do you do as the wife who is standing there and is like, like, this isn't sustainable. This isn't working. And he doesn't see it, he doesn't get it. And I think the most fundamental part of doing really good marriage work, it requires both parties, both people, both spouses to recognize the validity of the other person's experience. And so that's really hard, right? Because if you're the person that's seeing and you're seeing like something broken, you're seeing something not working, like it is natural, it is human to want to fix it. But the harder reality is that like our spouse is not an object that can be just fixed. Our spouse is a person that needs to be tended to and cared for in the midst of their woundedness. And so I think the hardest part of marriage work is being able to see like, yes, I see that something's broken, but I can't just go in and force it to be the way that I want it to be, or to be the way that I know is best or healthiest or right. Like I have to actually sit with them. Like, I don't know if it's like trying to think of a good metaphor here, but like there are wounds that actually you have to like, there's a waiting period, that you have to just sit and wait and like allow the body to do its own healing like process. But that can only happen in the conditions of safety. And so if the environment that you're asking your spouse to heal in, or to become aware of these wounds in, is not healthy, is not safe, is not an environment that can cultivate like healing, then we're going to find ourselves stuck in that like that shift. But if you're able to cultivate in yourself like that peacefulness and that stability and that sureness, that confidence, he's going to start feeling safe in the face of that, and he's going to start being like, oh, actually maybe I can look at this wound, and the safety that your spouse is going to feel is your willingness to say like, oh yeah, I can see like let me put those glasses on, those rose-colored glasses. Let me see your experience of your life and your family from your position. Like, help me understand, right? And he's gonna be like, oh, she's willing to do that. Like, she cares. She's willing to step in and actually see what things are like. Like, maybe I can offer her the same. Maybe I can do that. I think, yeah, we have to recognize that the wounds, the brokenness that we see are a way that your spouse has adapted to their circumstance. And so to change anything, kind of like you were saying, is like a total threat to their survival. Like they've learned how to survive through like these patterns and these personality traits and developing these things. So to just rip that off feels like it feels like you want to harm them. Like there's parts of them, those little child parts that still exist in them that like are like, this person wants to take me out. Like this person wants to get rid of me. This person wants to harm me. This person wants to make me feel pain. And so they're going to resist that. But if they see that like, oh, this person actually loves me and cares about me and wants to understand my experience, then we start like creating an environment and in a circumstance in which there's a willingness to be flexible, a willingness to see something from a different perspective. And like ultimately, we can only give what we have received. And so if your spouse hasn't ever received a relationship in which, their parents were willing to step outside of themselves to see a different perspective, to see a different way, they're not going to have that capacity. But if you show that to them, like if you give them that experience, all of a sudden they have a new tool in their toolbox. They might not really know what to do with it yet. That's the slow, brutal, hard work, right? The brutal, hard work is like, you have to go somewhere uncomfortable that you don't want to go.
Yeah.
And you have to see that. And then also you have to wait while they learn how to navigate and work with this new tool that they've been given.
Yeah, so we had a decent amount of this experience. I'm only child, was just a bachelor for quite some time. I'm very, very into what I'm into, and I'm like very into it, right? So just naturally need some time for myself. and very accustomed to that. And then Shae kind of on her side of the family, just has this need of just always being involved in everything. Um, like there was just no other way of doing things. Um, and all of those things just needed some time to be seen. So in the same way, we would experience like a family vacation, and I would say like, I can't handle this anymore. And she would be like, how? Well, no, we're all going on the boat. I was like, no, we're not. I'm not. What's the big deal, right? And I'm not doing it. And both of us had this experience of like, you can't be serious. I can't do it this way. And I was like, well, good luck, because I can't do it this way. So what are we gonna do? And we had lots and lots of fights, and didn't really even understand what was going on. And I think, you know, when I just think of these male female roles, I also think of just how much like women are capable of leading, and it looks so different, right? But like, as I experienced, Shae going through and doing some of her own internal work, and occasionally doing something a little bit different, and then at one point or another just sort of being like, okay, I think I see what's happening for you. um it kind of opened me up, right? Kind of like she said, I'm like, okay, I think I might see what's happening for you, and this isn't really ridiculous. Maybe next time that you feel really uncomfortable about, doing this thing, I won't roll my eyes at you, or just go to the, go to the other room and just keep going. Maybe I'll start seeing things a little bit differently. There's so much like just quiet, courageous leadership, that can come from the feminine role of just like seeing your husband like, you're really struggling. That's a lot. Let's just leave it, right? Um, and so I began to realize as we worked through a lot of this stuff together, um, okay, maybe it's worth, if she saw that in me, maybe there's something more that I can see. And then realizing, okay, there's a benefit to seeing things from her perspective. And it just kind of, it sounds so easy, right? But they do build off of one another. Because then I'm like, okay, I see what you're going through. All right, well, let me just be a courageous husband and sacrifice, and just go to this thing that actually, now I'm realizing, now that I'm looking at it, like, you probably actually don't even want to be doing this, but you don't know any other way. I got you. Like, let's go together. Now, I probably won't say it for another 3 months, but like, let's go do this activity that's boring and we're not into, or whatever, right? Let's you and me go. Um, and then realizing, like, now, as that changes, then Shae being more disposed towards the fact, like, look, you're not running away, and heck, maybe right now you still are, right? But like, you need this, and you come back better, and you're not doing this because, I mean, it might be too much to handle right now or whatever, but like, you're not abandoning me. Um, and as long as you need this, go do your thing. And you just kind of see, like, it was definitely from her end that started, but then also realizing, like, as we both became more open to that, just little, I mean, incremental, like inch by inch, the change that happens within just like a handful of years. It's like, now actually every now and then, like, Shae will take a day to herself, or just go do something alone away from her family, which I don't know, 4.5 years ago, not a chance that was going to happen. So it's really possible, and yet at the same time, like, it seems like it happened overnight, but it was so intense, and the whole thing sucked. But it's worth doing.
When you were saying, number one, I love the analogy of a light in a dark room, because that hits. I mean, it is. If you're in dark, and then all of a sudden this light comes, and you need the light. Oh my goodness, is it a jar to your system, and then it takes a while to get adjusted. I thought that was just a great analogy. And then, Adrian, I am the one who would have said, I'm not going on the boat.
Well,
And I remembered this time we had, my oldest was still little, this little nursling, and my in-laws came into town, and they are the kind of people that are like, we want to like schedule out the whole entire day. And our whole family is not like that.
mhm.
And even still, like if my girls go out to visit a friend and they go and spend the night, like it takes a while for them to recover because we're just a much more slow-paced family. And like we went to the beach in the morning, and they had a camper, and I stayed in the camper. I took a nap with the baby, and I did pop out, but it was not the whole time. And then they wanted to go to a museum, and I was like, no, I'm opting out. I'll stay in the camper. I'll sleep with the baby, and y'all have fun. And then they wanted to go out to dinner, and I was like, we're not, like for real. Like, we're not going out to dinner. Like, let's get pizza and go home, because that's where I want to be. And so, looking back, I think maybe it was, those little acts of like defiance, which weren't really defiance. It was just, I needed space to just, in the midst of a visit, decompress and shut out the pressure of walking on eggshells and performing for my in-laws. And maybe it was part of that. I'll have to ask my husband. I'll have to see what he thinks about that. Just those little acts of defiance that got him to realize that he could say no to his parents, and that it was okay, and that it wasn't being ugly. It wasn't out of bitterness or anger. It was just out of, this is what my family, my wife, my kids need right now. And it's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't want to be there. It's just because we have a different, perspective on this, this family event. And they like to do things like all day Christmas Eve and all day Christmas Day, like multiple houses. And I was like, we're not going back to that one where there's all the smoking, like with our baby. Are you kidding me? So that was helpful too, using the baby as an excuse to not, take her into that kind of environment. But I do wonder if those little moments, surely they must have, to just let them see, just like you said, that there is a different perspective, and it's not out of, trying to take a jab. It's just, this is how I do things. This is how you do things. And one's not necessarily right or wrong, but we can have some flexibility in how we do things. And that's what, like these enmeshed families, like there's no flexibility. There's no allowing a different perspective. I think you said that, Shae. The different perspective is just not allowed. And so, yeah, I felt myself very validated and seen.
That's great.
So glad.
And what y'all were saying. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode today. I hope you got so much out of it and feel encouraged, but maybe you're still feeling a little bit isolated and alone. And if that's the case, I'd like to invite you to join me in the Catholic Wives Plus Toxic In-Laws community. This is a safe space for you to feel validated, to feel seen, to feel heard, to participate in things like the St. Andrew's Christmas Novena that we're going through right now. And it's just a place for fellow Catholic wives to connect with other women who really understand exactly what you're going through. So consider this your official invitation to join us simply by going to toxicinlaws.com and signing up for the community. The community aspect is completely free, but there is a paid option to upgrade if you'd like further training on our monthly themes. So far, we've covered boundaries, we've covered legal protection, we've covered handling the holidays, and we have a new theme every month that is specifically designed to not only help you with these difficult relationships, but to draw you closer to the Lord. So please join us. Go to toxicinlaws.com, sign up for the community, and I'll see you on the inside. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional-client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.